Hello everyone and welcome to mass media or electronic media as your class is being called, depending. This is class 11 and we are going to talk about advertising and really a lot more than advertising. And so let's dive in. A little bit of history of advertising, and we're going to go all the way back to the 1880s and Quaker Oats Company. And they are going to ask people to ask for Quaker oats when they go to get their oats. And the reason that they had to do that is because in a lot of stores back in the 1800s that are not like today's modern supermarkets, there would be barrels of oats or sugar or flour, things like that. And for the most part, these items have to be pretty much the same thing. Sugar is sugar. There's, it has to be of a certain chemical compound and makeup and all that sort of thing, and oats and corn and things like that. There's not a whole lot that you can do with that product. It's not like computers or shoes or watches or something like that. They're pretty much the same thing. Aspirin, certain chemical compounds and things like that. And so the Quaker Company, they knew that they were in that dilemma that people would just go and say, I want some oats. I need a bag of oats or 5 pounds of oats or something like that. And they wanted people to specifically ask for Quaker oats, their oats. So they put out that very, very early ad campaign. I don't know if it's the very first, but very early ad campaign to get people to ask for Quaker oats. And that is differentiation of product brands. Like I say, even though a lot of products are pretty similar, if not exact, I would imagine nails, all sorts of stuff pretty much have to be of one sort. But Quaker wanted people to ask for Quaker oats, even though it probably didn't make much of a difference in the actual kinds of oats that you are getting. So there is a federal agency, as we can well imagine, that has oversight of advertising and the advertising industry. That's the Federal Trade Commission. Back around that time of Quaker Oats in the 1800s, there were what people called snake oil salesmen. And they would say that if you drink this, you will feel younger and you will be invigorated, and make all sorts of impossible to prove claims over their product. It's going to restore your virility or your hair or who knows what. And the term snake oil salesman came about because of that. People making these outrageous claims for their products and things. And sometimes some people would even say that the competition's product was bad or somehow poisonous or who knows what. And so the federal agency was set up to oversee such claims that couldn't be proven in any way, and also making claims against other products and things like that. And I'm sure that that the rules and the regulations that have oversight over all this are volumes and volumes thick, but there is a trade commission in there out there to really protect consumers as much as protect manufacturers from other sorts of claims and things like that against their products as well. FTC, and remember, in over the air we have the Federal Communications Commission, and there are other federal agencies known by their acronyms. I always like to remember what the acronym means, and then that helps me to know what they are over. FCC, Federal Communications Commission; FTC, Federal Trade Commission. And I think we talked about this earlier as well, but let's talk about it again. There are 2 ways we pay for a lot of things in our world. We pay for them directly or indirectly. That's about it, okay? Directly or indirectly. Direct payment means we don't have to see or hear advertising. So books, CDs, movies, streaming services like Netflix or Amazon, HBO, when we pay for it, we don't have to see ads. And that's fine, right? A lot of people like that. It might make that might make the item cost a little bit more money. Maybe you don't want to spend $12 or $13 a month on Netflix. It would probably be half that price if there was advertising, but a lot of people would gladly pay that extra money so they don't have to see advertising. And just as I said, the other side of the coin is indirect payment, and that is where we have advertising, which lessens the cost in many cases, and in some cases makes it outright free. So Google doesn't cost us anything, and that's because there is advertising. And the same goes for Facebook and YouTube. With newspapers, advertising is going to make the papers cost quite a bit less. Instead of maybe 50 cents or 75 cents, it might be $1.50 or $2 or something like that to put out a newspaper or a magazine, and so on. So we have direct payment and indirect payment. Just imagine on the internet, every time you wanted to go onto Facebook, if it was you had to sign in and it was going to cost you, a nickel or a dime or who knows what. Every time you did a Google search, it might be a nickel. It doesn't sound like very much, but think of all the searching we do. So I guess thinking of it that way, thank goodness for advertising. Okay, also in advertising, there is the television upfronts. And when somebody wants to create a new television show for over-the-air TV and cable TV and so on, I don't think Netflix goes through this process. I'm pretty sure Netflix doesn't go through this process because they don't have advertisers, but I'm sure it does go through a rather lengthy process nevertheless. But for advertising purposes, a network would probably have a foot or 2 feet of scripts to go through, and somebody would go through all those scripts and try to figure out which ones seem like a good idea. And of all those scripts, they might pick 10 or so to make a trial episode of. Let's just see what it looks like. Let's see how the actors interact. Let's see what the sets look like. Is it going to be shot with 3 or 4 cameras in front of a live audience, or is it going to be shot in the single camera film style? And let's check it out, right? Well, I can't quite see it in my mind. I can't quite see it, so make one for me. Make a show for me, and those are called pilots. And then of all those pilots, the network is going to thin that down and pick the ones that are going to go out and be made and go out over the air. And maybe they only say make 4 or 6 or 8 or 10, something like that. But they are going to have a commitment. So from that commitment, the networks are going to show the advertisers these new shows, and they are going to sell time. They're going to sell time. Basically, that's what electronic media is selling, is time. Print media is selling space. Okay, how much space do you want? A full page, a half a page, a quarter page. And how much time do you want? 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. Usually they would say, I want 30 seconds on that show every week for the next 10 weeks, something like that. Or maybe we have 3 or 4 products to sell. A lot of agencies are representing multiple products. They might be representing Coke and McDonald's and Chevy. So the agency might say, well, we want to buy 2 minutes of your time every week. And they would be representing their customers. And they would be buying time. So that is the television upfronts, and those shows are made from pilots. Okay, so in viral marketing, I told you we weren't going to spend a whole lot of time on history. We're going to get up to we're going to get up to the present day as fast as we can. Viral marketing, wonderful marketing for the agency and for their checkbook, I guess. I don't know if anybody uses checkbooks anymore, but for the checkbook, because you're not paying for so much. It is so good that people are spreading it around. It might be something simple like the trailer for a new movie, and so they would post it, and hopefully people would say, "Oh, wow, the new such and such movie looks really cool. Have you seen this? Have you seen this?" And people would spread it around. Customers would spread it around on their own. So sort of, I hate to mention virus of all things, my goodness, but that is viral marketing. This slide was done way before viruses got into the news, that's for sure. But anyway, viral marketing, and later on the internet we'll talk about viral videos and things like that too. Saturation advertising is kind of like this. This is New York, Times Square, where the New York Times offices are, actually going way back to 18 something or another. And it looks like that. I've been there. It is an amazing place. A lot of that stuff, as you can kind of tell, are giant video screens. Giant video screens. It's not just like billboards and things like that, but they're animated. There are lots of video screens and things like that. And just a little bit on Times Square. It went through some really rough times. It's kind of in the heart of New York City. A couple of streets, Broadway and a couple of other streets sort of come together there. And that is where, when they drop the crystal ball on New Year's Eve, and those giant crowds are there and they all cheer on, and there are live music acts and all that, that's Times Square. So you've probably seen Times Square at one point or another on TV, maybe New Year's Eve, maybe other times. And it went through a really rough patch in the 1970s. And a little bit into the 1980s. It wasn't this bright, cheery, happy, tourist-friendly place like we see here. And there was graffiti, there were porno movies, prostitution. It was really kind of a scummy, skeezy sort of a place for a while. A lot of people were leaving the downtown areas and moving off to suburbs and things like that. A lot of cities went through it. Detroit did, and Chicago and Baltimore. A lot of cities went through it. I don't really think that LA went through it the way some of these East Coast cities, New York and Detroit and Baltimore and cities like that. So if you go to New York for some reason, maybe you have an internship or something like that, it's a fantastic place. It's the Big Apple when they are running at full speed. When they're back and they're running at full speed, it is a very safe place to be. If you're a tourist, there are police officers all around on horseback and making sure that everybody's safe and so on. There are always in big cities places where maybe you don't want to go wandering off alone or with just a couple of people late at night. But in New York City, Times Square is a very, very safe place and kind of an exciting place. So when New York City is up and running full speed, then that would be the place to go. So saturation advertising, back to saturation advertising there, everywhere, right? So advertising on TV, radio, newspapers, and so a big product. It might be like Coke, it might be like Budweiser, it might be like McDonald's. These companies have really big budgets. There I see Bud Light right here. Some of these companies with really huge advertising budgets, they can afford to have TV ads and radio ads and Times Square ads and all the whole rest of it. And some big movies, the same thing. One surprising thought on really big movies is that some movies are so big that they don't need any advertising anymore. Everybody already knows the new Star Wars movie or the new Marvel, Avengers, Endgame, something like that. Half the planet knew that those big movies were coming out. And so they pulled back their advertising. They didn't need to advertise on TV and radio, 3 times an hour or anything like that, because everybody already knew in the public consciousness it had already reached a kind of a saturation level, if you will. So some stuff is so big they don't really need to advertise. And I'm thinking mostly of movies and things like that. Budweiser and Coke and McDonald's, they're always going to advertise, I think. I think they're always going to advertise. Anyway, that's the term, saturation advertising. Okay, a little kind of an oddity here. The Flintstones. It was a cartoon before the Simpsons and all of that. There was the the Flintstones, Fred and Wilma, and Barney and Betty, and the Stone Age Family. And it was on in the evening, so it was kind of a prime time animated show. Most animated shows in the 50s and 60s were on Saturday morning for kids, maybe after school stuff for kids, but this was a show that was actually on in the evening, 8 o'clock at night. So kind of for the whole family. But they advertised cigarettes on it. So I've linked to that ad. It's a lot of fun. Right around in here, feel free to pause this part of the class and go look at that link and watch Fred and Barney advertise Winston cigarettes. It's just so weird, I guess. That's really the best reason I have for including it in the class. It's just so weird to see cigarette advertising. Well, any cigarette advertising is kind of weird, but to see a cigarette ad for a cartoon show is doubly weird. The government outlawed all cigarette advertising on TV since 1970. So on December 31st, 1969, the last cigarette commercials were run on television, and when it hit midnight, that was it. There would be no more. They still had a strong enough lobby in Congress that they could advertise in magazines and newspapers and things like that. But over the years, the FTC has told the cigarette companies to sort of dial back. They didn't want them trying to lure smokers when they were under 18 legally. You're not supposed to be smoking cigarettes until you're 18. So they had to go after Camel with Joe Camel, which was sort of a cartoon character, and they thought that Joe Camel might be attractive to younger kids. And of course, that's really half the idea, is to get people to think about a product when they're not even quite ready to buy it, so that when they're ready to buy beer or when they're ready to buy a car, it's already kind of in their mind. Okay, I have to buy a Chevy, or I have to buy a Budweiser. So some advertising, I think by default, is going to sort of creep down just a little bit into people that aren't quite the right age, so that when they do hit that legal age, then they're ready for it. So, most famous TV ad of all time, Ridley Scott was the director, and by 1984 he had already done Alien and Blade Runner, so he had established his bona fides as a director, and he was paid, I'm sure, a pretty princely sum of money. And it is a 1-minute commercial for Apple, 1984, and they are referencing the book 1984, set with a totalitarian society and all that sort of thing. And their tagline, something to the effect of, Apple will show you why 1984 will be like 1984, something like that. So go watch that ad. I've linked to that as well. It's quite nicely done, very nicely done. It must have had a pretty nice budget. Check that one out. Okay, another in our grab bag of advertising related uh, ads and material and things like that. I wanted to start talking about cultural appropriation. I told you this class wasn't going to be 100% on just advertising. We wanted to sort of stretch the boundaries a little bit. So Mad Men was a television show. It's right there on Netflix if you want to watch it. It won tons and tons of awards 7 or 8 years ago, right about when Breaking Bad was out, a real the beginnings of the golden age or the platinum age of television, and uh, and it was about men who worked on Madison Avenue, and they dubbed themselves madmen because they were advertising people. They worked on Madison Avenue, which is in New York City, Manhattan. And on the very last episode of the show, our protagonist, who's gone through ups and downs and everything else, has left New York for a little while to go to California, and he's at a retreat. There used to be uh, back in the '60s, somewhere around 1969 or so, when the show is set from 1960 to 1970. It covers the 1960s over the course of 7 seasons, I think, something like that. So this is right at the very end, or somewhere around 1969, and our hero protagonist Don Draper is sitting there on the bluff above the Pacific Ocean, and he is chanting and he comes up with an idea. So his idea is cultural appropriation. He is not young. He's in his 40s. He's not a hippie or anything like that, and not of the youthful generation, but he is going, and he is inspired there, sitting on the sitting cross-legged on the bluff high above the Pacific Ocean, to appropriate the youth culture. And so, if you watch that, the link, it's the final sort of a montage of the characters of the show of the 7 years that people got to know all those characters, and we kind of see where they are ending up in 1970. And the last, I don't know, 30 or 40 seconds is Don Draper, and we see him sitting there on the beach and chanting and being inspired. Now, we know who the real advertising executive was who came up with this ad. There was a real ad for Coca-Cola where a whole bunch of, just like we see here, a whole bunch of young people of various various nationalities and various ethnicities are on a place very much like Don Draper was, high over the ocean and so on, and they all have a Coca-Cola in their hands. And you have to remember that this was during the Vietnam War, so it's a very sort of peace and love, and I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony, and it's a very happy kumbaya sort of a song, and it's fun. It really is. It's kind of fun. So the way that Mad Men sort of pretends that Don Draper came up with this very, very famous ad, Teach the World, I think it's called. I've linked to the Mad Men episode for that. Enjoy that, and when you're done, come on back. I wanted to keep talking about cultural appropriation here in the West, and by the West, in these terms, the social science term of the West means Europe and North America, Eurocentric, and it would also mean Australia. So that's what the West would mean, and the East would be everything from Russia to China, Africa, and the Pacific, right? So sometimes people will talk about the West, Western values. They're not talking about cowboys or anything like that. They're talking about Eurocentrism, and maybe you've heard that term. Maybe you had that discussion in English class. Why are all the writers we are studying white males? Shakespeare and Faulkner and Hemingway. Okay, so that is the West. And I don't want to get into that. That's a big discussion right there. But I do want to talk a bit about cultural appropriation as it pertains to the US and advertising. And here we see possibly, right, you be the judge of cultural appropriation. This is from Black Panther, as you probably know, made by Hollywood Studios. And we see lots of African cultural appropriation, wonderful designs and things taken from actual fabrics and things like that that would be in Africa, and they put it into their Marvel movie. So it's highlighting Africa and African culture. There's actually another term, if you want to have some fun, look up Afrofuturism. Google Afrofuturism. It's kind of fun. But this is possibly cultural appropriation. I think a lot of people, if it's done with the right feeling, aren't really unhappy. I think a lot of African Americans would be kind of happy to see that finally a Marvel movie has an African, well, I guess he's African in the movie, but African Americans would be thinking, this is wonderful. I'm seeing people that look like me on the screen, and the homeland or the motherland or the fatherland of Africa, and maybe not really bad feelings, maybe not really thinking that they're appropriating our culture for their nefarious purposes. Cultural appropriation, I don't think it necessarily is a bad thing as long as you know that it's there, as long as you is transparent. So let's talk a little bit more about cultural appropriation. That I think is a big thing in our media, our mass media that we're talking about, our class, and advertising. Is this cultural appropriation? Here we see some Asian kids, probably Japan, but I don't know for sure. It could be Korean. And they're wearing urban American, something you might see in the hip hop culture, okay, hoodies and things like that, and oversized jeans and all that. So are those Asians, probably not those kids, but the manufacturers of clothes, are they appropriating American culture, and specifically African American culture? Okay, and you can hear hip hop all over the globe, and just like rock. They call that soft power, just like our movies. Our movies are seen all over the world, and rock and roll music could be heard all over the world for the longest time. And now you can hear hip hop in Japanese or hip hop in Thai or Swahili. Okay, so who's appropriating whose culture? Maybe culture is just kind of in this big giant blender. I don't know. I don't want to make any calls or statements or anything like that. It seems to go back and forth, back and forth. There seems to be lots of sharing, I would say. If anybody's really good at appropriating culture, though, I would have to say America's pretty good at appropriating culture. But anyway, let's take a look at a couple more examples here. Here we have Taco Bell, okay, and that would be America appropriating Mexican culture, okay, with the burritos and tostadas and all that sort of thing. And there we have Taco Bell. Okay, so and I know that I have heard enough that that Mexicans, native Mexicans coming to the U.S. and having Mexican food, American style, sometimes laugh and say, "Wow, that's not anything like what we have in Mexico, right? That's not a kind of burrito you'd ever find in Mexico." But America is going to take it. They're going to make it palatable to the American taste, the American palate. Maybe not quite so spicy, maybe a little saltier. I don't know what. I don't know exactly what, but they would have scientists and people that would uh, decide how a burrito would taste to the most people, not to the most authentic, right? They're not trying to copy burritos that you might find at a restaurant or on the street in Mexico. They're appropriating that culture. They're appropriating that diet and selling it back. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. This is fun with food. Here we have India and the Maharaja Mac. So, and it's called a social burger. I see that right there, called a social burger. It's all vegetarian. Many Indians are Hindu. About 15% would be Muslim, and they would maybe be having beef or pork, but the 80% of Indians would be Hindu and not be beef eaters for sure. But here they're calling it a burger, and Maharaja Mac with corn and cheese, patty, grilled. Okay, it looks pretty good. I'm sure it's full of greasy, fatty, fried stuff, just like every Mac would be. I'm sure it tastes pretty good. But anyway, there we go. Again, who's appropriating culture or not? I'm sure the McDonald's people, when they wanted to start franchising off around the world, they knew that beef burgers and Coke and French fries weren't going to sell in every single corner of the world. And I'm sure at some point they said, gee, why aren't we selling any more? Why aren't we selling this stuff like we sell in America or in Europe? And that's why. And if you remember the scene that we saw in Pulp Fiction, they are talking, the John Travolta, and he's talking about how it's a little bit different in Europe and how they serve beer and wine at McDonald's in Paris. So yeah, that's kind of fun too. I guess I could have put that slide up. Here is a Chinese McDonald's, and I have no idea what all this is. Maybe some kind of a soup and some kind of a seafood, I'm guessing. Probably a Coke. I see a Pepsi thing on there. Probably some kind of a Pepsi or soft drink, I guess you might call it. And I have no idea what some of this stuff is. It's kind of fun to Google McDonald's menu, right? Google McDonald's menu China, or McDonald's menu Brazil, or McDonald's menu Africa. You come up with some really fun stuff. That's for sure. One of the things, thinking about food and appropriating culture and so on, and I guess it's from France, is French fries. And it seems like French fries are everywhere on the whole planet. Seems like everybody likes French fries. Potatoes are potatoes. They're deep fried, greasy goodness, and nice and salty. And it seems like just about anywhere on the planet, you won't have any problem selling French fries. And that sweet, what some people call sugar water, okay, Pepsis and Cokes and whatever. But in other cultures, they do taste a little bit different. Just as a side point, what they call orange juice in Thailand is not exactly what I think of as orange juice. It's much sweeter, and I don't really care for it. But it's orange juice, right? If you're in a hotel or whatever in Thailand and you get an orange juice, it's not exactly the way I think of orange juice. And here we have some more cultural appropriation. Okay, Panda Express. And I know that many Chinese tourists come here, try out a Panda Express, and wonder what the heck that was all about. That's not anything like food in China. But again, it's been reformulated to appeal to the Western taste buds and stuff. in big cities, in New York and LA, if you want real traditional Chinese food or Mexican food or whatever, you can find it. You can find it. These franchises are really not pretending to be all that authentic, I don't think. Okay, so there are a series of ads that were done. They're short films, uh, and they're under the heading of The Hire, and they're too long for television. They were made maybe 10 years ago or so. They hold up really well. They're really good. I've linked to two of them, and so stop anytime here and go over, and you can either watch uh, the one with Madonna, or the one with James Brown. It's kind of a soft sell in both of these short films, and there's I think about 8 or 10 altogether, and you can track them down on your own. They're 7 or 8 or 9 minutes long. They're way too long for television, but it worked on the internet. It worked on the internet just fine. Sales did increase a bit, and as filmmaking, they are very nicely done, top-notch action directors. John Woo and Guy Ritchie and people like that directed these The Hire ads, and so yeah, check them out. They're all with BMW sporty racy type cars in them, but with very interesting storylines, things like that. So check out one or both of those. I think you'll enjoy it. So for advertising, number of challenges, and streaming for sure, and also DVRs. So with DVRs, you can fast forward through ads. The Dish Network has a hopper, and with streaming, it's direct, right? So you're not even getting ads. And so how are advertisers going to break through all of that, right? How are advertisers going to break through all of that? And there are a couple of ways. Everything isn't going to be direct payment. Everybody doesn't want to pay like HBO. That model isn't going to quite work for everything. It's not going to work quite for everything. People aren't going to pay for every single thing they watch or listen to, or the internet. Okay, so advertisers still have a bit of a challenge to break through some of that. One of the ways would be product placement. Okay, here's Wayne's World, and they're clearly having a little bit of fun with product placement. But even in James Bond movies, he'll be wearing a very particular kind of wristwatch, or the car that he's driving. It might not be the Aston Martin of some of the older movies and things like that, or even Mission Impossible, and so on. He might have a very specific smartphone or whatever, and that is product placement. And even things that you might not even think about, even FedEx, Starbucks, all that kind of stuff. For the most part, the advertisers pay for that. Sometimes they just say, well, that's in the script, and we're just going to go with it. But other times, they are going to get a chunk of money, right? Even in the middle of the movie. And I know I mentioned earlier that movies were direct payment and there weren't advertisements in movies, but I guess I should have an asterisk right there, because sometimes not quite so obvious and obtrusive as this. But yeah, they're gonna have product placement. What kind of cars they're gonna drive? X-Files. They always drove Fords. I think the FBI has a deal with Ford Motor Company, and I think they just sort of worked off of that, so that they always were driving Fords. And I think a lot of shows, police shows, I think generally they are going to end up driving Fords. and most everybody on TV is going to have Macs, Mac laptops, all that kind of stuff. I think Apple spends a lot of money on product placement. So yeah, product placement is one way, right? It's one way. Even in Netflix, right? You can get an ad. You can get advertised at in Netflix. Another thing are banner ads. And so here's a cricket match of all things. But I know in soccer, World Cup and things like that, they don't have quite as many advertiser timeouts as we do here in the US. So here we get to see the action. Now, if you're watching something like this on a phone, you're not going to have much screen left, frankly. You're not going to have hardly any screen left. But if you're watching on a big flat screen TV, a 50 or 60 inch flat screen TV, there's plenty of screen space. There's plenty of space to put Pepsis and KFCs and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that banner ads would work very well on my phone or anything like that. The picture's already pretty small. But again, we are trying to figure out a way that we can advertise, right? That we can advertise for live sporting events, things like that. Some sporting events aren't set up where there can be quite so many timeouts. That's one of the geniuses, I think, of American football. Is there are so many places to put commercials, and baseball too. There's just so many places to put commercials. Not like soccer. And I don't know. Cricket's a lot like baseball. I would think they could put commercials all over cricket. I don't know. There are also AR, Augmented Reality. That's another nice way that you can drop in ads. And here we see in baseball, the people in the stadium would not be seeing these ads back here. Only people at home watching on TV would see those ads, and they would change maybe once an inning. I'm not exactly sure. And here we have some soccer and the same thing. Okay, those ads would change every, I don't know how many, maybe you buy them by the minute or something like that. QR is quick response code, and that links to videos and things like that. So a lot of times I will see this in a print ad, maybe even on a billboard or on a bus poster, a bus stop where you've got the seat right there, and behind it there's a poster, and in the lower corner you'll find a QR code, and once you take a picture of that with your smartphone's camera, that will lead you possibly to a video or more information, something like that. So that is a QR code. The association principle, a key part of advertising. My life will be as exciting as the people in the ad using that product. Okay, young and beautiful and healthy and cool looking and all that, right? Just casual enough with just the beard stubble and the whatever and all of that, and multicultural, and that's my life too, right? If I drink that beer and I see that their hands, I didn't notice this before, their hands, to me it looks like a Corona, but I see that their hands are covering up the labels pretty well. So this might be a picture specifically to illustrate that point. I grabbed most of this stuff off of Google Image, so I'm not really sure what that was, but I know this is an ad. Kind of showing the association principle. Beer in particular is really good at that. People are on the beach, everybody's young and beautiful and healthy and so on, and I can find a guy like that, or I can find a girl like that if I just drink that product. Okay, so I'm going to associate myself with these people. That's a real key part. That's why models exist. Clothes, there's a lot of clothes. Boy, you cover up the model's head, male or female, cover up the model's head and think, do I really like that dress or that shirt or those pants? The model makes it look quite attractive, but sometimes if you put put your hand over the head or the face or whatever of the model, it may not look quite so good. Sometimes I actually do that. I say, well, I don't know if I really like this or not. You know, she's really beautiful, but I'm not sure if I should buy that for my wife or not, because is it her I'm thinking of buying, or is it the dress or something like that, or is that him or not? Okay. Anyway, the association principle. 40% of ad dollars are now spent on internet advertising. And this is a few years old, as you can tell. This is the nearest one that I could find. It's somewhere around maybe 3-4 years ago. I see it's sort of a dip right here. Can't exactly tell. It looks like a little bit of a dip, sort of a spike and a dip, spike and a dip. So it might have dipped down, might be on its way up. By 2020, we might be up in here. I don't know where we are. The nearest I could find is somewhere around 40, 42, 43, 44%. We'll call it 40 on internet advertising. And before that, television was the big cost center for advertising. Television was the big place for advertising, and online internet has beat that out. Now, almost all online internet, almost all of it, is like in 3 different companies. It's all Google or Facebook or YouTube. That's, you know, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of ads on the internet, but it's almost all going to about 3 or 4 companies. I might have missed one, but really, Google and YouTube and Facebook really gobble up most of the ads, and so there's a lot of poor internet companies that aren't getting much advertising. But that is quite interesting, really, from like practically nothing. I mean, computers and the internet, they were around right here. YouTube and video started coming in right in here. YouTube, especially video, not just pictures and things like you might see on Facebook. I know you can see videos on Facebook, but that's when we get sort of a rise here, when we start getting video right around in here, and we start going up. This would be mostly early days, text, stuff like that. So demographics, we've talked about that: age, sex, education, ethnicity. Psychographics, what kind of a person are you, I guess, psychologically, just like it says. Are you adventurous or cautious? It doesn't matter if you're male or female or young or old, or what your race is, or what your sexual preference is. What kind of person are you? And somebody figured that out. Somebody figured that there was even a better way to find out what your values and lifestyles would be. Would you rather spend more money for higher quality, or are you on a budget and you'd rather have something that's nice and stylish and maybe not particularly well made, but you're only going to wear it for, you know, a little while, and when it falls out of style or out of fashion, then it's okay. You don't need it to last for 10 years. Okay, you just need it for the season. So anyway, that is psychographics. Values and lifestyles. I just put this in just because it's fun, I guess. FedEx. Okay, now, how many of you see an arrow? How many of you see an arrow? Okay, let's find the arrow. There it is. All right, that's it. That's it. Did you see the arrow or not? Now you can't help but see the arrow. Okay, so focus groups are focusing in on very few, not dozens and dozens and hundreds, but just a very few. You're going to, like that, often sit around a table and have conversations and things, and describe what you're looking for and what you like and that sort of thing, and maybe trying to dive into your psychographics and all of that. Um, they are referenced in the video. The last video that I have for you is from PBS Frontline, and it's called The Persuaders. It's a few years old, but it's still pretty good. I keep thinking, is there anything better? Is there anything better? And when I look around, every college in the country has a video, DVD, something of this documentary, and it's called The Persuaders. And I'd like you to watch about a half hour of it or so. It's pretty good, I think. I think it's real good. And it's going to talk about focus groups, and FedEx is kind of in there a little bit too. And they're going to talk about clutter and saturation advertising and all that. And I think it's really good, and so does everybody else. It's seriously, The Persuaders is in every single college, library, or media department or communications department. Trust me, I've been to many of them, and it's everywhere. So check it out. It's your last link there, and they will talk a little bit more about focus groups. And it's very entertaining. I think it's really good, even though it's a few years old. I think it's quite a good documentary. So either wait till I'm done with this, or stop right now and dive in. And about the first 29 minutes, and then the last maybe 3 or 4 when he sort of wraps it all up. And it's pretty good. And we will meet some of those people when we go back to Frontline, when we look at another documentary generation, like when we talk about computing and the internet. So good stuff there. Check that out, please. They are also going to talk about guerrilla advertising, which is mildly illegal. Here is a company projecting an ad on the side of a wall. Sometimes you will see posters put up on construction sites and things like that. That is guerrilla advertising of a sort as well. Guerrilla advertising. Okay, how can we advertise kind of on the cheap? Really, hire a team of stealth people, drive around in a, I don't know, SUV or something with a projector, and find a building, and there you go, guerrilla advertising. Clutter is too much advertising everywhere. It's hard to say. You know, to me, that's sort of a pattern. It's bright and colorful and kind of pretty. And when we saw that, site, let me go back to it. Let's see if we can find it here. Where is it? Here we go. Okay. It's kind of pretty and kind of nice. I don't know that any ad is breaking through, and that's the term that they use in the documentary as well, trying to break through the clutter. Are you seeing the ad for Rico, or for Bud Light, or for, I don't know what that is, Squad Cars, Yahoo, AT&T? I see ads all over. It's kind of pretty, but I'm not sure that that any of the ads are getting through, other than just kind of as a pattern. Okay, so clutter. Okay, too much everywhere. And what is highlighted quite well, I think, in the documentary is the big idea: spiritual marketing, and getting a sense of belonging and a sense of meaning. And many people have products that they really don't want to live without. I don't know that it matters what kind of jeans I wear or what kind of shoes I wear, but I am going to have an Apple phone and an Apple laptop or desktop. I'm kind of sold on Apple. I like it, and I like the way it works and all that. And if I couldn't, I wouldn't be all that happy. And maybe you are like that as well. Maybe you love your shoes. Maybe you love Coke. Maybe you love, and you wouldn't buy anything other than Nike. Maybe you wouldn't, and maybe you love Disney. I kind of forgot about that, and one of my students kind of mentioned that they had a huge collection of Disney paraphernalia. They love it. They're spiritually connected to it, and season passes and all that wonderful kind of stuff. So sometimes in advertising, getting that really, really close spiritual sense of belonging and meaning to a product. Again, I'm not big on Coke, but a number of years ago when Coke reformulated their primary formula from classic Coke to new Coke, there were a number of people that were very, very upset. I had some friends and they bought cases and cases of it because they were very, very upset. So the big idea, spiritual marketing. And also in the documentary, there will be some talk about advertisements for myself. And you will get the chance to see Bob Garfield. You have heard Bob Garfield's voice in our podcasts. And you will get to see Bob Garfield very briefly in the documentary from Frontline on the Persuaders. And he is kind of a cynic, I guess. Bob, maybe you can tell, he's a little bit cynical about lots of things in life. And he says a lot of ads are just building the advertiser's portfolio. It's such a cool ad and it's got cool cinematography. It's probably not going to sell the product, whether it's for Infinity or Haagen-Dazs or whatever. But it's, winning cinematography awards or advertising awards and for the ad agency, and maybe not really going to sell too many more products. So cult brands, there we go. I thought I had this. There's Disney, Apple, Harley, Coke, Oreos, sure, Nike, Prius, Tesla, Vans, and so on. Okay, so cult brands that we feel a special, that sense, that spiritual sense that we love. So some products have ad campaigns depending. They're really for everybody, old people, young people, blacks, whites, yellow, brown, everything, every culture, everybody. And so they will tailor the ads to certain segments rather than to try to create an ad for everybody all at once. McDonald's has ads for men, and they will advertise during sport shows, basketball games and things like that. And at McDonald's, we will see 2 or 3 or 4 young men at McDonald's. And then when McDonald's wants to advertise on maybe a TV show, maybe like a Voice or Survivor or American Idol or one of those kinds of competition shows that the whole family watches, then they will have the entire family in the ad. So again, different ad campaigns for the same product. There we go, a couple of guys, okay, at McDonald's. I don't know what this is, I have no idea. But anyway, sure, not a family, right? A little bit different than just a family. And we might ask, or some people have asked, is advertising getting ahead of the people? And here we see a same-sex family, and some people would be uncomfortable with this. And so Nissan took a little bit of a chance. Are they going to attract enough people to make it worth their while, or are they going to repel people that aren't in favor? And there are both sides of all that. There are people that have very deeply seated beliefs in same-sex marriage and all that, and they would think, oh my goodness, there's no way I would ever buy a Nissan again because of that awful ad. And there are people like that out there, and Nissan knows that, and advertisers know that. And so some people accuse advertising of being sort of bland for everybody. But lately we start seeing ads that are a little bit more for other segments of the population. I've seen a number of same-sex ads. I'm going to jump to this one here real quick. There's another one, okay, at the Biltmore. Same sex, opposite sex. Sure, what the heck, for everybody. And let's go to the Biltmore. And not only are they the same sex, but they're gorgeous. Okay, so there's that. All right, like models, of course. Okay, so anyway, I want to go back here. At the Super Bowl ad from a couple years ago, not only interracial, I think it was an IHOP, International House of Pancakes, and it was an interracial couple at IHOP. And we see same-sex couples. There was also a Coke ad where people were singing America the Beautiful, America the Beautiful, and some people would say, Americans speak English, right? You can hear them saying it, Americans speak English, and they are not going to be comfortable or happy hearing America the Beautiful sung in Mandarin or in Spanish or in French. And people complained. Yes, people complained about America the Beautiful sung in Russian. Okay, they didn't like that. And so, again, advertisers are going to have to think, are we losing as many people as we're going to gain? What's the upshot? What's the downside? And so on. And ideally, and I have to applaud them for taking a chance. Good for them. Good for them. It's a business first. You've got shareholders, you've got stockholders. People have invested their hard-earned dollars in that company, and they want to get a return on their investment. Maybe they're going to send their maybe that's for retirement, or send their kids to college. And all of a sudden, some crazy advertising agency gets way too far ahead, and all of a sudden the stock in the company tanks because they were too far ahead. Maybe this ad 10 years ago would have really hurt Nissan. Okay, 10 or 12 years ago might have really hurt Nissan. Today, probably not. Okay. And that's just so nice. I just like that one. Okay, so this is the cynical stuff here. Digital media's business goal. And I mentioned this once before in class, that there are a number of young coders, I guess, and people that work at tech companies, and thinking that maybe they're going to change the world, they're somehow going to increase knowledge or connectivity or something like that, something wonderful and meaningful like that. And instead, it's about the bottom line, right? We're going to collect user data and sell more ads and meet Wall Street expectations and appease shareholders and increase the stock price. So who cares if people on Facebook are connected? Who cares if people using Google are getting information? We don't care about any of that. All we care about is the stock price going up. And so a number of young tech workers are being very disenchanted. Gee, I thought I was, I had stars in my eyes. I thought I was going to do a good thing and help change the world. And instead, all I'm doing is raising the stock price. And some people are leaving big companies for smaller boutique companies that are really trying to lessen their carbon footprint and be culturally sensitive and diverse and all that sort of thing, maybe at the cost of having giant salaries and giant shareholder stock prices and all that kind of stuff, but they are true to a certain set of values. So some people are, again, kind of being disenchanted. I keep reading about this and how some young tech workers are thinking of moving on. So there's a line in the documentary. I hope you watch it. It's really good. It's only a half hour. Please watch it. It's so good. I know I'm wasting half my ad dollars. I just don't know which half. Okay? I love that. I love that. It really is an imprecise science, very imprecise. It's hard to measure. Really, you almost need a time machine, because let's say McDonald's has a new McRib sandwich. Okay, so we're going to advertise our McRib sandwich for a month and watch sales, and then we're going to get in the time machine and we're going to go back and we're not going to advertise for a month. And that's really the only way that you can measure, did the ads work or not? Where people are going to buy the new McRib or the McFlurry or whatever the heck, right? Or the new Bud, whatever. And the only way you can know is to not advertise, right? To advertise and to not advertise. I suppose you could say, well, we're going to advertise in Dallas and we're not going to advertise in Houston. That might be a way, but it's just really hard. The point is, it's really hard to figure out if advertising is doing much of any good or not. And even speaking of advertising, political campaigns are practically all the time. And how far will political ads go? That brings up, it opens up a really huge can of worms about the internet and fake ads and stuff coming from Russia and hackers and trolls and all of that, right? There's a ton of stuff. It is a huge topic. We're going to get into it just a little bit when we get into computers and the internet and all that. And again, are all those Russian or Chinese or North Korean or whatever trolls and ads and all that, are they really doing anything? Are they swaying the election? Did they sway the last election? Is there any way? Was the last election going to turn out exactly as it did? Or was online videos and trolls and news and all that, did it contribute? Okay, so there we go. Mass media, electronic media, class 11 advertising. Please click on the ads. The short ones are fun, the Flintstones and Apple. If you haven't done so already, then go check those out. BMW ads are fun. They really are. They're very nicely directed. And then the PBS Frontline on the Persuaders is quite good. Please check that out. And thank you so much. And we'll be back next time.